In episode 7 of The Force Awakens, we meet a woman named Rey, living on Jakku. She goes and scavenges through crashed planes to find, and spacecrafts to find things to sell to make money for food. She was planning to stay on Jakku the rest of her life, but as we talked about last week, she came into contact with a stormtrooper named Finn, and they together worked to get a droid named BB-8 to the Resistance. But along the way in their journey, Rey struggled with wanting to be back on Jakku to wait for her family that she was planning to experience and have come back to her at some point, a family that left her a decade before that. And like Finn, she has a pivotal conversation with Maz while on the planet we talked about last week. And I want you to take a look at what they have to say to each other. Maz wants to give her some wisdom after Rey had just seen Luke Skywalker's lightsaber and a vision about her future. So take a look at this conversation that they're having together.
What was it? I shouldn't have gone in there.
That lightsaber was Luke's and his father's before him, and now it calls to you.
I have to get back to Jack.
Han told me. Dear child, I see your eyes. You already know the truth. Whomever you're waiting for on Jakku, they're never coming back. But there's someone who still could.
Jack.
The belonging you seek is not behind you, it is ahead. I am no Jedi, but I know the Force. It moves through and surrounds every living thing. Close your eyes. Feel it. The light. It's always been there. It will guide you. The saber. Take it.
I'm never touching that thing again. I don't want any part of this.
Rey's struggle is very present in this clip. The tension inside of her to redefine who she is. She spent so much time defining herself by waiting for her parents to come back. Her past defined her future. And she had this one-track mind of getting back to Jakku in hopes of finding her family returning. But Maz is trying to encourage her to find a new identity, to look forward to what could come for her and where she could actually belong. In our text for today, we're continuing to walk through the book of Ephesians, and Paul is transitioning his letter from some very heavy theology and doxology that he had in the first half of the letter, and now is using a prayer to shift the point of the letter from theology to practical application, what to do with all those heavy thoughts that he just shared with them. And he does so with a prayer in hopes that this gets through to their head. So we're going to start out by reading from Ephesians chapter 3, verses 14 through 21 together. I'm going to read a different translation than you will see up on the screen, but don't let that trip you up. We're doing that intentionally to expand our minds and to hear more of what God has to say to us. So starting in verse 14. For this reason, I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth takes its name. I pray that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant that you may be strengthened in your inner being with power through his Spirit, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith as you are being rooted and grounded in love. I pray that you may have the power to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Now to him, who the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than all we can ask or imagine. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus to all generations, forever and ever. Amen. As I mentioned before, Paul is using this as a transition text to shift from one thought to another thought in his letter to the Ephesians. So he's using this, and he's reframing their brain again. The reason, the main point, the significance of the church is what Jesus Christ has done, that he brought together people groups that were once divided. We talked about that last week and the week before that, about how God unified divided peoples like the Jews and the Gentiles to make one group, unified in him, redefining those people as his children. And so Paul says here in his prayer that every family in heaven on earth is named, that God sees you and names you and calls you belong. You are his. He pauses here to make sure you grasp that in this prayer. And this isn't about like, woohoo, I've got a name, but that you are his, you belong somewhere. Not simply that somebody can say more than, hey you, get over here, but that you are wanted by the God who put the stars in the sky. And so God is more than just naming us, but calling us into existence, telling us where we belong, and defining our future. So Paul starts this prayer and says, this is a pinnacle truth for us, that this truth should shape us. You belong, you have been named. You once had identities as Jews and Gentiles, but now have been given a new name as my people, and are called and wanted. So this truth, Paul says, is supposed to change you. That it's going to be more than knowledge, but something that impacts your future, impacts your reality. He wants to see evidence in the Ephesians that they grasp this concept, that they have been named and brought together as one. It's not just something like, sweet, I've got a name badge now, thanks guys. But that identity is supposed to shape them and change them. He talks about how this change could happen in a few different ways. First, he talks about the fact that our spirit, the Spirit of God, strengthens us. That as we believe and experience God's work, that he enters into us and changes us. This redefines how Jews would have thought at that time, because the temple still existed right then. And for the Jewish people, to feel the presence of God, you needed to go to the temple, because God's presence was literally, physically in the Holy of Holies, the center of the temple. But now Paul is saying that God's Spirit dwells within you. Christ may dwell in your hearts. No longer do you need some fancy thing or a fancy priest wearing a robe for you to have access to God. But he is present inside of you. You have access to him directly. And that changes us. That truth of God's presence within us is not just a privilege, but it's also a responsibility. The temple was set aside as a holy place, a place of worship, a place of purpose. And now we carry Christ within us. We are the holy temple, carrying God within us, and are given a responsibility. It's so easy for us to hear Christ dwelling within our heart and think warm fuzzies, or simply think about salvation. But it's so much bigger than that. The responsibility is about transformation. It's about letting God into our hearts and being changed by that truth. The knowledge of Christ's love for us should change us. And as we are changed, we become rooted and grounded in God's love. The indwelling is a precursor to transformation. Christ's presence within us leads to change. You can't be around goodness and not be transformed by it. Just like if we're around somebody negative, it's very easy for us to get their negativity rub off on us and then we're grumpy the rest of the day. But when you're in the presence of real love, of someone who looks at you and says, I want you in my life, I value you, I created you to be mine, that changes you. When you see that face to face, that changes you. When we are rooted and grounded in God's love, we are transformed so that we can be filled with God's fullness and do far more abundantly. Paul wraps up the prayer with those phrases because we are built for tasks. We are built to serve God, not simply to do whatever we want to do, but to glorify Him. I believe our wants and desires are built into what He has called us on this earth to do, whether it be a love of basketball or playing an organ or baking, that God builds those loves and desires inside of us for the sake of His glory. And so now, we are redefined. No longer are we, a woman from South Dakota or a bunch of Hoosiers, but we are Christ's children, part of the family of God. Oh, sorry, there's some in here that don't want to be identified as Hoosiers. Heaven forbid. I'm a South Dakotan and I don't care. It's fine. But we don't have to be identified by those names anymore. They are things that we can celebrate. They are things that God puts in us that build us with joy. But they're not the purpose we exist for. We exist on this earth to glorify God, and He, living inside of us, makes us capable for that. Our identity changes our responsibilities. For Ray, she had built her identity on waiting for her family, waiting for them to come back after they left her at such a young age. She was willing to waste her life on a desert planet because she wanted to belong. Ray needed to redefine herself and where she could belong. And fortunately, she had a great conversation with Maz that led her to having to face that reality. Ray's conversation with Maz made her acknowledge her parents weren't coming back and that she needed to look at who she was and what she wanted to do with her life. It changed the trajectory of where she was going. We are claimed by God. God made you and called you His own and desires an intimate relationship with you. He desires to be present within you and to transform you as you build that relationship. This truth should change our trajectory of our lives. It's so easy for us to get wrapped up in good things like our careers, our hobbies, and relationships, and let those things be the thing that defines our identity. I'm a pastor, I'm a teacher, I'm a factory worker, I'm a farmer, and that be the thing first and foremost that defines our identity. Or maybe our relationships define them. I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a cousin, I'm a husband, I'm a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend. That those maybe define us. And those are all good things. But the first thing that identifies us is the thing that sets the trajectory for our lives. It's the thing we orient our lives around. And if we shift our focus from the things we do or the relationships we have to being defined by the fact that we are a wanted child of God, that shifts everything else to glorify Him. We still can be a factory worker, a father, a son, a daughter, a girlfriend, a boyfriend. Those things are still good, but how we do them changes. Ray is still a child wishing to meet her parents. And this isn't the last time we hear of her in the series wanting to know more about her parents. But how she lives her life changes. What she pursues changes. When we define ourselves by our career or relationships or our hobbies, we miss the depth of our value in God. God values you so much that He lets His presence dwell in you. He lives within your very being, speaking to you, wanting to grow deeper in a relationship with you. That is how valued you are. That the one who put the stars in the sky, the one who put breath in our lungs, the one that organized all the atoms and elements in this world, cares about you. And that should change us. You belong. And if you open your mind and heart to hear from Him, He will strengthen and equip you to do beautiful things through His kingdom. Let's pray together. God, I have to admit that I catch myself getting wrapped up in other things. I catch myself defining my identity by the things I do instead of by who you have made me to be. I get wrapped up in the busyness of this world, in all good things, but forget that you value me, that you want me, and you name me. Lord, I pray that as we forget, that your Spirit reminds us of our value. That you speak to us, that you send people into our lives to remind us of our value, of who we are in you, and how that can affect us. Lord, I pray that you use the gifts and skills that you have put inside of us, the likes and dislikes, that all of those things can be used to glorify you, to honor you, and to bring others to know their value in you. I'm humbled by the fact that you love me. And I'm grateful to know that you love each of us that way. Help us to live into that love. In your name I pray. Amen. We're going to close together with a final hymn. Number 501. we all get to heaven. You can stand if you are able. We'll sing together.
May that truth change us, and may we go out and share that truth with others.